That's Somratna Kara, who heads science communications at CCMB, and me, Teja, who has a similar role at Delhi Prasad Eye Institute, have started. Sci Cities are attempt to bring science and the into the cultural conversations of Hyderabad. And we also have a bunch of STEM stalls right there where scientific institutions from around Hyderabad are showcasing their science. So when you have time, please go and see them as well. In this session in the morning, we have Karthikeyan Vasudevan, who is the moderator for the session.
Prominent people who are engaged with understanding and dealing with human-wildlife interactions. I'll first invite Janaki, Lenin. Janaki has an experience of 30 years in the area of popularizing wildlife human interactions, observations of wildlife in a very unique manner that highlights the role of these species in the environment. She has written many articles. She has started her work as a person who could communicate the lives of these animals through voice, and then engaged with communicating the aspects of the biology of many wildlife through her articles. And many of her articles have focused on how humans interact with wildlife and how it has changed over time and how we can deal with the situation that is becoming a big issue currently. The second panelist is Avinash Visvanathan, a young eco warrior, I would say. He is involved in rescues of snakes in this city, and he's just not a person confined to interactions with rescues in the city. He has a fairly wide experience with human wildlife interactions. Their organization, which is called the Friends of the Snakes, which many of you might know through the phone calls that they might dial asking, I have seen a snake, please rescue it. They also deal with rescue of other wildlife, and they do wonderful awareness generation programs at the Nehru Zoological Park in Hyderabad, and they have probably touched many people through their messaging about how to care for wildlife. So let me start this discussion first with Janaki. Janaki, you have authored many articles related to human wildlife interactions, how they shape our thinking and how they shape the outcomes. So, can you highlight a few that have been almost that changed your perception of how human wildlife interaction happens?
Many years, that's what we've been doing, moving leopards from farmlands to the forest where they belong. And there's a scientist called Vidya Atreya who heads the Wildlife Conservation Society now, and her research really changed the way I or a whole bunch of people saw what is the wild, where do leopards belong. And so basically, she was saying these leopards are farmland leopards. They belong in the sugarcane fields, in the corn fields. That's where they have been born, raised. They've never seen a forest before. So you put them in a forest, it's alien to them. They have no idea what to do there. It's an unfamiliar habitat. And her research in Akoli Valley in Maharashtra was really eye-opening, and she translated what she studied there to Mumbai, where there are leopards in Borivali National Park, and they come out every night to prey on dogs and then go back, retreat during the day into the forest. And there are all these high-rise apartments around the national park where people have been complaining, oh, there's a leopard that took my dog, that we saw a leopard walking on the compound wall. Come and do something about it. And she, along with the forest department, created this group called Mumbaikers for SGNP. and their job is to, when they receive a complaint, to go out, see what the problem is, talk to the residents, and if a leopard hasn't attacked a person or created a threatening situation, all it needs is to reassure the residents that it's okay. The leopard knows what it's doing. It will go back. It's not a problem. And for the last, I don't know, 4-5 years at least, I'm not really sure how long it's been going on, people have learned to see or live with leopards, and if they see a leopard, it's not a cause for alarm. And that to me is a real radical change within a decade. Like, we went from seeing leopards as this big, dangerous, threatening animals that is going to attack you the moment it sees you, to this amazing creature that shares the city with you. It's a creature of the city just as much as people are.
It's a very interesting interaction that you had with Vidya, and you got to really see what has happened there, and a positive change in the people, how they perceive this predator in their environment. Avinash, I have a question for you. How did you get into this whole rescue of snakes in the city? What prompted you? What made you feel that this is an area which needs to be addressed? And as a youngster, I assume that you had many options of doing many things in your life, but you chose to dedicate yourself to do this work. Why? Why did you do that?
Thank you, Dr. Vasudevan. I have a very simple story to share. I was petrified of snakes. The moment I see a snake, I would kind of freak out. Yet I was staying in an area that was infested with them. And members of this organization, Rajkumar Kanuri Garu, they used to come down to our places, rescue these animals. So two things happened there. One, they were saving these snakes from getting killed, and also assuring human beings. And that, I think, was a positive impact that kind of changed the way I look at these animals, and also how I kind of shaped or curved my career.
I just jump in. How we speak about animal interactions also matters. So I used to use the word infest, and I stopped using it when I read this article 2-3 months ago by a shark researcher. She says, "What do you mean by shark infested waters? That's where they live. It's the shark's residence. You can't say shark infested water." And I'm like, oh my God, all the time I've said croc infested swamps or whatever. So we have to change the words we use when we communicate with people. And I think we have a lot to share from different areas of, taxa or research.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and that also brings my attention to something that I wanted to ask you down the line, but I'll put it out now. There is a lot of reporting that happens about human-wildlife interactions. They say, man-eater prowling in the village of Kagasnagar, or tiger kills a very young girl in a village, or snake bites are destroying the rural communities, or causing a huge health concern. So where do you think this messaging is going to change, or the outcomes of interactions that happen continuously? Because people are reading it, people are absorbing it, people are also experiencing it. Now, how is it going to change their perceived risk and actual risk? Maybe Avinash first.
Yes, I think the way we report news articles, that I think has a great impact. Most of the time, as Janaki pointed out, human-wildlife conflict, especially when it comes to big carnivores, are reported or sensationalized. one accidental human kill is translated as a man eating, man eating a tiger, man eating leopard, and things like that, man eater. So that is not the case. Sometimes they kind of respond to the proximity of the human being. It can be just an accidental injury leading to death. So the reporting should be responsible. The reporting from the department could be better worded before you kind of use these terminologies, and that I think will trickle down into the public.
What's your view of this?
Yeah, even as a writer, it's an evolving process, and I keep getting uh, calls from researchers saying that's not the right word to use. For example, crop raiding by elephants. And T.R. Shankaraman is a person who studies various wildlife in Valpare. And he said, you can't say crop raiding. What does an elephant know about raiding? It's just eating. It eats what it can, something that looks like food. So it's just doing what comes naturally to it. So using the word raid, it's a loaded word. To you, it means the leopard is transgressing. It's taking what doesn't belong to it. But or whether it's just a natural wild species of grass in the forest, it's just as far as it can see, it doesn't see those divisions between domestic and wild. So now I'm learning, like I said, the word infest. It's just 2 months ago that I said, oh no, I'm never going to use that word again. So it's an evolving process even for a writer to figure out how to describe something that we reflexively say man eater, crop raid, how do we, what are the words that are more neutral that could bring the temperature down, make it less sensational? It doesn't sell copy, but at least it helps in furthering understanding and give a more sympathetic view of what's happening.
Yeah, actually, the IUCN has also recommended that we don't use the word human wildlife conflict and we look at human wildlife coexistence, and the possibilities that can lead to coexistence is a better outcome than emphasizing that there is a conflict, or we should somehow mitigate it or address it in a very urgent way.
Yeah, so in 2007, I worked with Professor Sukumar to come up with this action plan for human elephant conflict. And so I was traveling around India. It's just a small anecdote to put things in perspective. And I had read in the literature that this particular area near Masnaguri was a hotspot of conflict. So I go there and I'm speaking to this Kuruba person, this elderly gentleman, and I'm say I've come to look at human elephant conflict. He said, conflict, ah. And he just couldn't figure out what I mean. It's the way of life. This is what happens every day in their lives. They learn to live with it. They've done for generations. And here I am, an outsider who sees a problem where there is no problem. So that, again, is why we emphasize the use of words.
Yeah, and Janaki, again to you, in your article on Predator on Our Porch, you wrote an article about living with a predator just next to you. You were living in Chengalpet district in Tamil Nadu, and you had a place to live where there were these leopards moving in and out, and you had dogs in the same area, and you had written about it in your book and even in your articles. So, where do you think your resilience to continue to live in that place where there is a predator moving around came from? By understanding what the leopard's behavior is, or you just had this interest in just continuing to live in that place, having known that this predator can potentially cause harm?
Well, it wasn't easy. Like any other urban person, you always want other people in other places to do conservation, but not in my backyard, right? I don't want a snake or an elephant or a leopard in my backyard. It can be, somewhere else. So we lived in this place. I think it was a good 10 years before we realized there was a leopard there. And the first thing that happened was I lost a dog, and I thought someone had stolen it. And we were putting up posters. We made a police complaint. I mean, I really loved that dog, and I missed it. So I think 2 weeks later, my mother said she lived nearby, and there is this forested hill that overlooks the farm. She said, I saw this German Shepherd like animal on top of the hill. Its nose wasn't so long, its ears weren't so sharp. And both of us thought the same thing, leopard, like, but from where? Who? I mean, how did it come here after all this time? So we called our friends, the Irula community, and two of them came and they tracked. 2 weeks later, I can't believe how they found it. They found like bits of hair sticking to the thorny plants, and they tracked it into the forest, and we recovered the bones. So that was the first time we realized that there was a leopard living there, and I was just furious. This leopard's taken my dog. I don't want it here. Let's call the forest department. Let's catch it. Let's move it somewhere else. And Rom was like, but we are here in its habitat. Where will they put it? This is a forest. We moved here. So, and I think that's what calmed me down, and I realized how futile that would have been to just take a leopard from one place and put it somewhere else and make it someone else's problem. And so we did the next best thing. So we looked after our dogs. So I always say, until then, we had guard dogs. Now we are guard humans guarding our dogs from leopards. So, yes, we put out camera traps. We followed this leopard for many years, and we moved from there about 4 or 5 years ago. And the last photograph we have of that leopard is of this really old fellow. His whiskers are sort of bent, his ears are all a bit chewed up on the edges. So he's getting on in years. I don't know if he's still alive. And we moved to a place near Mysore. It's absolute farmland, no forest anywhere nearby. 1 week after we moved there, Rom puts a camera trap, leopard. So Rom says, oh, the leopards followed us here. And I'm saying, no, 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 they are everywhere. We just don't know.
Yeah, that's a nice recount of what has changed in terms of your perception of the risk that you face with these predators around. Avinash, I just Googled snake rescues in Hyderabad, and I got Friends of the Snakes as the first hit. You have a rating of about 4.5, about 600 reviews in Google. The second one is VNS Pests. Okay, and I checked their website. They have a rating of 5, and they exterminate pests, termites, rodents, everything. Okay, so uh, when as a person who would just ask Google if you had a snake in your backyard, obviously people will call you, but the perception is that they are pests. They don't belong to the place that you live in. So how do you deal with this situation where you are almost called like an exterminator of snakes, and they just want you to get rid of them?
That's a very complex question that I may not be able to justify in a short span of time. Uh, I agree that terminologies are important. Just bouncing back at IUCN's recommendation, but the people on the ground, they still feel that an apt word to describe the situation would be human-wildlife conflict, right? In India, about 66,000 people succumb due to snake bites every year. And that is a very gross underestimate of what's happening, right? You might kind of spot them around, and despite our efforts, we continue to do that. From the periphery of the city, we kind of catch all these snakes and try to relocate them nearest forest area. But those that are rescued from the city, they don't have any viable spots. No, the only viable spot would be a vacant private land, which is bound to be developed probably in a year's time or so. Right? So that conflict is always prevalent. I'm reminded by this quote, which goes like this: we are losing the battle because we are losing the land that they need, right? So the major challenge is the factor of habitat loss and degradation. When it comes to rescuing of snakes, we are trying to bridge the gap. We are trying to avoid snakes that are there in open areas, vacant plots, and all. Despite that, they sometimes enter into human habitation, and we are forced to remove. So, although we don't intend to exterminate snakes from the city, that is not the choice, but to begin the conservation aspect of it, to kind of send the messaging, there has to be some mitigation measure, some involvement, something that people can rely on.
Yeah, just a continuation of the same discussion. Roughly, Hyderabad is growing at 3.54% in terms of human population. And your rescues are growing much faster, right?
11%.
Yeah, 11%. So, what is your operational limitation and how are you going to deal with this huge problem that's going to come in the next few years?
See, these are problems that you cannot kind of solution immediately. It involves right from policy to implementation. We are pushing, in various, meetings as to how future towns are developed responsibly into tier 1 or tier 2 cities. You need to have those ecological islands where there are viable spaces. Or if there is an existing patch, a revenue land that can be made into a conservation zone. That is something that the forest department should start exploring, because once we are developing an area, once it's an urban area, you may have places, you may have vacant spaces with greenery. But just remember that these are places that are degraded. Usually you have garbage thrown in, you have a lot of rodents, a lot of infection that are transmitted from rodents, even the vegetation, sir. Most of the places you have lantana camera growing, you have Mahavira, right? You have this, what is that?
Eupatorium.
Okay. So you have a lot of these weeds that kind of change the soil composition, a lot of these weeds that make animal movement difficult. So these animals are not just snakes. Animals like pangolins, you have a lot of these. So you have these lot of ground-dwelling animals that kind of have a struggle when it comes to living or thriving in urban areas. So I think right from the policy, right from the start, we have to kind of have a proactive approach, is what I strongly believe.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I think we have to understand one thing. Humans create habitats for some venomous snakes. Non-venomous snakes too, because we are a filthy people, as mammals go, and we create a situation where rats thrive. And where rats thrive, snakes won't be far behind. So people need to understand that if they want a habitat with no snakes, they really have to deal with rats. You remove one snake, another one is going to move in there because it's got all this food. That space isn't going to remain vacant for very long. And if you remove a non-venomous snake, there is no guarantee you won't get a venomous snake coming in there. So I think a large part of what people assume is their habitat has to change. That perception has to change. It's not that, some snakes are very particular about the habitat that they need, like Europeltis. They are very sensitive to temperature, the soil the permeability of the soil, things like that. Like you change the temperature a little bit and they are away, gone. But with rat snakes, cobras, Russell's vipers, kraits, they are all primarily rodent-eating snakes, and there are many, many more snakes of those species because of us. You take humans out of this planet, and you won't have this many numbers of those snakes. So we've got to understand that just because Avinash has come and removed that snake from your house doesn't mean that another snake won't come. So you're raising the risk of your existence by not being careful. You act as if you're in the wild. You are really in the wild as far as the snake is concerned, because you've given it shelter, you're giving it food, you're giving it water, and you're giving it enough space where it can find a mate and breed. That's all a snake needs. And if we cannot deal with all that, you might as well just forget it. He can keep catching 13,000 snakes a year. Next year it'll be 11% more, and the year after it'll be an exponential number more. You're not going to solve the problem. You're just going to keep removing snakes. And what is the point of removing the snakes? You don't want to be in any danger. But what is happening to the snake? You're removing it from a place it knows very well to a place where it doesn't know where to find food, where to find shelter. Like one of the snakes king cobras that Rom was tracking, it went back to the same burrow to shed its skin. It's a very, very sensitive time of a snake's life. It can't see, it's blind. All it does is lie holed up. And it knew that hole was its hole. It would go there every time it went into that stage. And that would be once in 3 or 4 months. But it remembered where it was. So if they are that faithful to particular spots, you remove that snake to another place, what is it going to do? It's like, the only analogy I can think of is like we know our little neighborhood in Hyderabad. If I take you from here and put you in Saudi Arabia, like in Riyadh, where are you going to find food? Do you know how to go about it? Where to find water? It's like it's a completely alien environment. But because we are humans, we talk, we learn to share information, which separates us from other animals. But an animal can't ask another animal, where do I do what? So I think we have to keep that in mind as well. A little bit of sympathy for these other creatures, a little bit of space. Create that space physically and in your hearts and minds, that this is the way of the future. Can I just take 1 more minute? I'm going on for a bit too long. We've borrowed our entire conservation philosophy from the West, where you create this protected area and everything else is human landscape. Now, what does that do? You're creating a mythology that this is for animals, this is for humans. Anything seen here doesn't belong. So when you have a lack of space, like we do in India, we are a 1.4 billion people country. And you look at all the examples of coexistence here. People like the guy I told you about, the Kuruba, who didn't see a problem. He was happy to exist with an elephant. And I'm the outsider coming and creating a problem where there was none. And if we find role models in India, we can show the world how to do conservation. It's a completely different paradigm. Could I do that? I just have a few images to show. So
Before that, I just have one question for both of you. We'll run that and then we'll go to the slides and the movie. Both you and Avinash touched upon policy interventions. Because we still, if you take wildlife, you and me cannot even handle one, right? Because you need an authority to tell you that you are qualified to handle it or you are permitted to handle it. And wildlife actually belongs to the state. And where is where do you see the intervention of policies related to human wildlife coexistence or promoting human wildlife coexistence at the policy level? You closely work, Avinash, with the state of Telangana. Can you tell us what has happened in your experience with support from the state that has changed the situation with human wildlife conflict?
Again, it is always not very easy. I don't know why I'm keeping saying that. Uh, yeah, the department, the forest department that we usually work with, they kind of look at human wildlife conflict from a different lens. For them, obviously, animals are problematic if they encounter human beings because there is a compensation aspect, not just the human life loss, there's a compensatory aspect to it. Okay, and sometimes mobs kind of end up lynching forest offices in case of a snake bite death and things like that. And so from their side, I don't know if there's much outlook. Nowadays, they are looking at declaring a lot of these spaces as conservation zones, and they are kind of creating a lot of initiatives. The state of Telangana, for example, is doing these awareness workshops for the public, so that there is more, awareness amongst the individuals who visit. They are trying to send this message that you can coexist and things like that. But again, government alone is not able to do that. We as NGOs are partnering with them to create that positive mindset.
Okay, so that's a very important point that the civil society has a very big role to play in even shaping the policy. Uh, Janaki, you wrote about the saltwater crocodiles in Andamans, and you were highlighting a conflict situation that had panned out, and you were talking about croc areas and no go zones for people. I think it was the incident in Havelock where a couple from somewhere outside India had got mauled by a saltwater crocodile, and I think one of them lost their life in that process. And you had written in that article that we should think of areas which are uh, purely meant for the crocodiles and purely meant for humans, which goes against what you said here, that it's a very Western concept.
I don't think even the experts know what to do in a situation like that. It was one of the ideas borrowed from the Karnataka State Task Force for Elephant Conflict. They were looking at an area of um, area in Karnataka near Hassan where there were elephants living in this tiny little patch of forest which didn't have enough forage for them, and they were going out into the fields and eating crops, and people were very unhappy. And so they were looking at these possible ways of managing the landscape where there are humans. Like you have these areas where there are elephants, where you manage as elephant areas. You have areas where uh, people live, where there is just no hope of coexistence. And then you have this in between area where you manage both people and elephants. It was an idea borrowed from that. It wasn't my idea. But I think the problem in Andamans is like conservation success. So all this time we talk about, oh, we have to conserve this, that, and the other. But what do you do once you are successful? So I think that's a conundrum that they're still grappling with. And I don't think we.
So you mean the saltwater crocodile population actually made
Yeah.
it
So
to
they
a
were
very
almost
large
wiped out in the 60s, and in the 70s, when they did surveys, there were very, very few of them. And after that, there were releases. Captive bred crocodiles were released, and there were sanctuaries created, like Loha Crocodile Sanctuary, and they've bounced back with all the and protection laws. So they've bounced back, and they are moving into areas where they were never seen in the last 50 years or 60 years. So it's like me suddenly dealing with a leopard. People are suddenly dealing with salties, and they don't have the experience or the generational memory, because many of them are from mainland India. They don't know how to live with crocodiles. So it's a very new and emerging situation, and I don't think the experts agree on what needs to be done. I mean, how many crocs can you remove and put in a zoo?
So I think you just used the word generational amnesia. Is that you can call it? Yeah. Actually, another person, Dr. Asad Rahmani, mentioned the same thing, and that's where I think policies are really important, because they remain, and people can come in and go, but there are clear regulations or guidelines on how to implement something like a situation where humans and wildlife might come into conflict. So I think we will open the session for a few questions, because we have had covered a wide range of aspects. Janaki has a few slides to share and a 3-minute movie. So I would request that we just get down so that the screen can be visible to the audience, and
Okay,
then
so
we'll
I
come
just,
back.
sorry,
Yeah.
I wanted to do this because it's one thing to say we have to live with snakes and, yeah, it's one thing to say live with snakes and another thing to actually live it. So a few years ago, Rom had this opportunity to go to West Bengal, to this little village. Could you do the slides, please? It's a very short PowerPoint. I won't bore you. It's just 10 slides. It's not working? They don't know. Okay, so this is a typical village. It's 4 villages in West Bengal. You can run through it one after the other. This is what it looks like. It's typical mud huts, livestock, there's haystacks. Can go. Ducks, ponds, trees. Yeah. And they worship snakes like a lot of us do, except that they really, instead of just worshiping idols, they really worship the real thing. Yeah, so this is one of the temples in that village. Okay, and there live monocellular cobras, and nobody worries. Snakes don't worry, people don't worry, and if you read the field guide to the snakes of India, it says it's a nocturnal snake, comes out at dawn and dusk. But in this village, they are daytime creatures. They don't, because they have nothing to worry about. People aren't after them. They don't even raise their hoods. They just go about their lives. So they were more interested in outsiders taking photographs than the snakes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is every day in this village. So I just wanted to show you that there are these role models in India that we need to look for to know how. I mean, it's possible. That's what this shows. I mean, we can do this. We've got it. Yeah, they're watching a cobra swallow a toad, and they are looking at the photographer. And this is inside the house. So it's not just that they tolerate snakes outside, but they don't mind if they are under their beds, in the kitchen, among the utensils. And can you? So this is about the same place, but I thought some of the shots were a little bit more interesting than in the PowerPoint presentations. So in Bengali, in that particular dialect of Bengali, they call the snakes old ladies. So if you're born in this village and this is your everyday life, you have nothing to worry about. But what if you're a woman who's from somewhere else, gets married and comes to this village? That's what this lady is talking about. How petrified she was in the beginning. Yeah, I'd like to know in which part of the world they'll call a snake darling. Yeah, we can stop it. I mean,
Sorry, it's mine. Maybe we can come out. So we've seen. Hello. So we've seen these slides that Janaki shared, and also the movie, and I think these are amply highlighting coexistence is possible, and how we mediate it and how we promote it is what is going to be a challenging task. And now I open the floor for questions to both Janaki and Avinash, and I'll try to moderate them. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Thank you, Janaki and Avinash and Karthikeyan, for that discussion. Thank you also for raising that important perspective of how human-centric we've become, and how our lexicon is all about us. I just wanted to mention, I mean, we are possibly amongst the top 5 biodiverse countries in the world, possibly next to Brazil or Amazon. And we have this richness in our wildlife. These are our national treasures. And the other important thing is that we are heading towards urbanization. And what you demonstrated in the documentary about this lovely model of coexistence, this is this is threatened. I live not far from here, and this used to be millions of years of rock formation, very ancient. And within a span of, like a year and a half, this was decimated. And of course, we got this wonderful facility here and we are having this discussion. But years, millions of years of rock formation, and the ecosystem that was there was decimated. Very close to home, we've got dogs that bond with the land they are. And I live in a apartment here, and there is a drive to remove the dogs. And that dog keeps coming back. It dodges the security system and wants to be associated. The point you mentioned about the snake that wants to come back to where it belongs. So we've got this situation happening. I just want, and you mentioned policy. What model of policy do you have in mind, Janaki and Avinash, where, we can have this coexistence? Because urbanization is going to happen, and we are looking at possibly 60% of the country getting urbanized. So, yeah, sorry for that long monologue.
I think we'll restrict it to wild animals. So the domestic dog issue is not something that we will touch upon now. Although there is a welfare angle to any animal being, displaced or caught or treated badly. So I will ask Avinash first, and then maybe Janaki.
Two things regarding the free ranging dogs. It is a threat to the wildlife also. See, at a policy level, yeah, there should be some uh, you know uh, plan or strategy to handle wildlife, because once it's a free ranging animal, it might impact the native wildlife. Okay, and dogs and cats, feral cats for that matter, they kind of are very adept. They are able to hunt, they are able to scavenge and remove the eggs from the ground and things like that. So it's certainly the problem which I think people are still trying to figure out. So I can't comment on that. Regarding the coexistence aspect of it, it certainly was an inspirational video, and I strongly believe people in our villages are more adept in coexisting. In urban areas, it's very difficult. Personally, I would not want a venomous snake in my house. No, I don't want to kill it, but if I end up accidentally stepping on it, if I kind of roll over on it when I'm sleeping, complications are to a point where people end up losing lives. I've been bitten by snakes many times, and I know the ordeal that you'll have to go through to handle or overcome that snake bite, the fear of losing a limb, the fear of losing a life, and then a hefty 1 lakh, 2 lakh hospital bill, provided there are no organ failure and things like that. So, yes, we have to coexist. We have to have strategies to ensure, especially in urban areas, strategies to ensure that snakes, other wildlife are staying. At the same time, we also should not kind of bring these wild animals inside the house. That's why, responsible garbage management is a key aspect. As Janaki pointed out, you kind of have rodents, you are invariably bound to have snakes, and venomous snakes at that.
I can't speak at the policy level because I've been out of touch with what's happening at the policy level. But I think when you say you don't want to live with a snake, it's not really your choice. They are there. You've just seen it that one time. Like it's living 365 days of the year after year around you. On that one day you saw it, you think, oh, a snake has come to my garden. But it's been there all the time, You really do not have a choice. It's it's up to the snake whether if it decides this is a comfortable enough home for it to live. And if you, like I said, you remove one, you're just inviting another one, and it does not change the situation. So I'm sorry. I know there is a risk factor. There is a risk factor. But when you have wild animals, no matter what they are, leopards, elephants, the risk is never zero. You have to be careful. That is there. You just, like the analogy I make is when we lived in our farm, before I realized we had a leopard, we were like water buffaloes, just bumbling along, not looking where we were putting our feet and hands. And after the leopard came, I suddenly became alive. I was like looking, you know, watching the bushes. Is there anything lurking in the shadows? Is there anything behind the house? So I think it kind of helps you come alive, I think, if you have a wild animal around.
I think just having the knowledge that they exist in your backyard or in your environment itself is going to trigger a suite of actions. And very often, people don't realize what to do, and it's like, they have just had headlights facing them or a deer on the headlights kind of situation. So because many people who migrate to cities are from another city or some other crowded place or never seen these animals in their lives, would face a situation of trying to handle them or do things which are not so nice for the animal and for themselves. And I think the cautionary note that you mentioned is, I think, very important, that we understand and deal with these situations responsibly. Either call your organization for help, and I'm sure you also talk to them before you just land up there and try to rescue. So you make an assessment of the situation, whether they are seeing a snake 50 meters away from their window and they are calling you to rescue, and you give them some advice and calm them down, and then you perform your activity. So and in that context, I think putting it for a city audience like this makes a lot more sense.
Okay. That movie was really good. That movie, no, like you said, we stand as a role model to the Western. And dealing with snakes, and when you see a cobra not lifting up its foot is something. When you deal with cobras, you know that as soon as a cobra sees a person, it's again become alert, and for the whole village, no, the snake doesn't even lift its head or hoods up. I can understand the no, coexistence and the comfort the zone they're living in. An amazing movie and amazing shots. Okay, my question is towards the conservation. Me, as a growing up and loving animals, towards conservation of animals. In the conservation part, we talk about the enrichment of wildlife. We talk about bringing back numbers of wildlife, like let it be bringing back numbers of crocodiles in the rivers and leopards and elephants. At the same time, there's a degradation of landmass. The shrinkage of rivers and forest. Where are we heading in the aspect of conservation? Is it just an hopeless adjustment or in future, or is there some hope for conservatives and nature lovers? Where are we heading? Because at one point we're talking about high numbers of animals, at another point, no, it's not happening. The land mass is reducing. So where are we heading? What do you guys see?
Okay, the numbers of animals that are increasing are the adaptable animals that can adapt to situations, like, rat eating snakes or grain eating peacocks or, animals like that. But it's like the great Indian bustard, for instance. It's also a bird like the peacock, but it has a very, very finite, what it wants in life is very specific. It's those creatures that we are losing right now because of all the changes and degradation that you're talking about. We don't have enough grasslands for the great Indian bustard, or where they are, there are these great big electric lines into which they fly, or there are stray dogs that are eating their eggs and chicks because these are ground nesting birds. So that's just an example. So I think where we're seeing conservation success are species that are able to adapt to the situation, but where we are seeing losses are the ones that are very, very specific in their requirements. And with climate change, you're going to see a lot more because there are all these like rainforest creatures, orchids that we are not going to be able to save because the conditions they need don't exist anymore.
And just wanted to add one point, and also it's our approach to conservation. We have protected areas which are suitable for something like tigers, and that has naturally excluded many of the underrepresented areas like the grasslands. If we had bustard as our national animal, we might have, had more bustards today than it was when we started, in 1947. So uh, the the approach we have taken is a single species and areas which were originally hunting areas that became tiger reserves. But those animals that we have tried to improve have actually improved, and you already talked about it in the context of the saltwater crocodile, right? Avinash, what's your take on this?
Yeah, there has to be concerted efforts. Not just. I mean, we are certainly losing land mass, but even in the areas where these animals are being protected, as Janaki pointed out, great Indian bustards are being killed within their landscapes. One windmill, or one power line, it ends up killing a flock of great Indian bustards in no time. So we have to have a lot of research. We have to understand what's working, and we have to implement it in our routines.
Yeah, something like making these power lines underground, and obviously this comes with a huge cost. But if we need the bustard, we need the power lines to go underground in many parts of Rajasthan and other places. Yeah. So Vishal, I think there's a question there. Okay.
Good morning to you all. We had a very nice session, and I just wanted to inform that I also concur with that lady that Hyderabad was once a terrain, was a rocky terrain. Now it is a tower terrain. So, but they have introduced biodiversity parks. How far the biodiversity parks they help in conserving the wildlife, and especially snakes and other things. That is one thing. And then the another thing, nowadays we are finding every day, almost every day, elephant entering the crossing the road, and either a tiger or wild animal crossing the roads. So, what is the best way to contain? Most probably they come for water. Most probably they come for water. So, what can be the best arrangement to contain them in their residences?
The urban parks, usually around the city areas, are designed by individuals who kind of are biased towards certain species of fruiting plants and vegetables. So they are never able to recreate a natural ecosystem, sir. So it may be favorable for certain species. It may not be a functional ecosystem for a wide range of animals. First thing, regarding the linear projects, lot of animals get killed while they are crossing roads. It's not just in search of water, it can be in search of mates, or their generic migration. And animals do get killed a lot, and nowadays we are kind of trying to implement a lot of underpasses or trying to construct flyovers over an area. It's very difficult to decline development. People are complaining that they don't have a road for even an ambulance to pass. When that is brought into the picture, when roads are required, we try our level best not to make these roads go through the forest. And even if they were to go through a forest, there has to be mitigation measures that we are constantly professing.
Yeah.
Hello everyone. So I had a question with that documentary that you showed about that snake village, Cobra village. So as you know that that's like snakes are like afraid of humans generally, and so living in a very close proximity to snakes, there might be some accidents or like snake bite cases sort of thing. So to understand the coexistence better, so what do these villages do after they meet such accidents? Like because in our perception from urban area, we think that villagers are very superstitious and they go to all this Baba and all the temples sort of things to heal that. But if it is a venomous snake, that mortality would increase. So if we can understand like how do these people deal with those snake bites and how do they react to it, that would be a better understanding on how like coexistence is there.
Yeah. So first of all, the documentary, I had nothing to do with it. It's just a BBC documentary. Um, so there are bites, and these they figure are feeding responses. They mistake a moving human hand or leg to be something edible and they bite. But it seems that the snakes aren't giving enough venom to kill the person. It's just a mild bite. So they go to the doctor. They do go to the, the, what do they call them? The faith healers, the herbal medicine guys. All of that happens too. But what the villagers firmly believe is that none of them will die from it. And they are willing to take the risk of being bitten because they know they'll survive. And it's like, we're talking about dogs. Like if you throw stones at a dog 10 times, the 11th time it's going to bite you because it's in that state of fear, excitement, its adrenaline is shooting up. So it's the same with a snake. Like if you keep harassing it, it's not going to think twice before it bites properly. I mean, like with lots of venom. But if it's used to people just walking by, leaving it alone, it's not under any terror. It just thinks, oh, that looks edible, let me bite it. It's like a casual bite almost from a snake's perspective. So it's not biting in self defense where it will give a lot of venom. So it's Rom met like a 3-year-old who had been bitten because the snake was hunting for a toe that was under a gunny sack that was being used as a doormat, and the kid happened to walk by, and the snake bit him. He was looking for the toad, but bit the boy. So he had a tough recovery, but the villagers don't hold it against the snakes.
I think we have run
Remarkable
short of
people, no?
time. Those who have a few questions can come later and talk to the panelists. I think it was a wonderful discussion we had, and more interesting questions came from the floor. And I really admire the audience who have been patiently listening and also interacting with this knowledgeable panelists. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you
much.
for a
Thank
Sunday,
you.
coming on a Sunday morning.